Lena Carter had 4 minutes to live. Three loan sharks pinned her against the shattered remains of her apartment door, and the one holding the lighter was smiling. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Blood trickled from her split lip. She'd borrowed $30,000 to save her mother's life, and now these men wanted 50, plus interest paid in screams. With her last moment of freedom, she'd sent a single word to a number she never thought she'd use. Help. The reply had been immediate. Don't make a sound. 4 minutes. But 4 minutes felt like forever when a flame was inches from your skin. If this story grabs you, stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Lena's journey travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. Rot. The morning of Lena Carter's 24th birthday began the same way every morning had begun for the past 6 months, with the sharp metallic scrape of the cafe's espresso machine and the weight of exhaustion pressing against her ribs like a physical thing. She tied her apron strings twice, once because the fabric was fraying, and once because her hands needed something to do besides shake. The early shift at Moretti's Cafe paid $9 an hour plus tips, and if she smiled enough, avoided mistakes, and pretended the world wasn't crushing her into dust, she could sometimes walk away with an extra $40 by noon. $40 was 4 days of her mother's medication, or 2 weeks of ramen, or 1/10 of the monthly payment she owed to men who didn't accept excuses. Lena, table 6 needs a refill. Marco, the owner, barely looked up from the register. He was a good man, good enough not to ask why she sometimes came to work with bruises hidden under concealer, or why she flinched when the door chimed too loudly. On it, she grabbed the coffee pot, its handle warm and familiar in her palm, and wound through the narrow space between tables. The cafe was small, wedged between a dry cleaner and a shuttered bookstore in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, the floor tiles were cracked, but the coffee was decent and the rent was cheap, and the regulars came because nowhere else opened at 6 a.m. Table 6 was occupied by Mrs. Chen, who always ordered decaf and left a $5 tip even when her coffee cost $2. Lena smiled, genuine this time, and topped off the cup. "You look tired, sweetheart," Mrs. Chen said, her voice soft with concern. "Just a long week." Lena's smile didn't waver. She'd perfected the art of lying with her face. "How's your grandson?" Mrs. Chen's expression brightened, and she launched into a story about a school play and a misplaced costume. Lena listened, nodded, laughed at the right moments. It was easier than thinking about the envelope in her locker, the one with the red stamp and the phone number she was too terrified to call. The door chimed. Lena's smile faltered, because the man who walked in was the same man who had been walking in every morning at exactly 7:15 for the past 6 months. And every time he appeared, the air in the cafe changed. Adrian Volkov didn't look like a monster. He looked like money. Expensive suit, tailored so precisely it might have been painted onto his frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a Roman statue, all sharp angles and cold symmetry. He moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself, the kind that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. But it was his eyes that unsettled her, pale gray, almost colorless, and utterly unreadable. They tracked her across the room the way a wolf tracked prey, not with hunger, but with patience. He always sat in the corner booth, always ordered a double espresso, black, no sugar. Always left a $50 bill on the table, even though his coffee cost $3. And he always watched her. Not in the way men usually watched her, the quick, greedy glances that slid over her body like oil. Adrian Volkov's attention was different, thorough, assessing, like he was reading a language only he understood, written in the way she moved, the way she breathed, the way she flinched when the door slammed. Lena didn't know what he wanted. She was too afraid to find out. She approached his table with the coffee pot, even though she knew he hadn't touched his first cup yet. "Good morning, Mr. Volkov." He didn't smile. He never smiled. "Lena." Her name in his mouth felt like a secret. "Espresso?" "Please." She poured. Her hands were steady. She'd learned to make them steady. "You're working a double shift today," he said. Not a question. Lena's pulse jumped. "How did you... You were here when I arrived yesterday at 7. You were still here when I left at 9. His voice was low, accented faintly with something Eastern European that softened his consonants. You'll make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not. The words hung between them, too intimate for a conversation between a waitress and a customer. Lena took a step back, the coffee pot clutched like a shield. Is there anything else I can get you? Adrian's gaze held hers for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table. A business card. Black, matte finish, with a single phone number embossed in silver. If you ever need help, he said quietly, call. Lena stared at the card. Her throat felt tight. You don't have to explain, just take it. She didn't want to. Every instinct screamed that accepting anything from this man was a mistake, that people like Adrian Volkov didn't offer help without expecting something in return. But the envelope in her locker had a deadline, and the men who'd sent it didn't make idle threats. Her fingers closed around the card. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian nodded once, then returned his attention to his coffee. The conversation was over. Lena walked back to the counter on legs that felt like water. She shoved the card into her apron pocket and tried to forget it was there. She lasted 3 hours. The loan sharks came at 10:30, right in the middle of the morning rush. There were 2 of them. One was tall and skinny, with a neck like a stork and eyes that didn't blink often enough. The other was shorter, built like a fire hydrant, with knuckles that looked like they'd broken more faces than Lena had served coffees. They didn't bother with subtlety. The tall one grabbed her wrist as she passed their table, his grip tight enough to bruise. Lena Carter? Her stomach dropped. Let go of me. You owe us money. I'm making payments. Payments? The short one laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. You're 3 weeks late, sweetheart. That changes the terms. The cafe had gone quiet. Lena could feel every pair of eyes on her, could see Marco's hand hovering near the phone behind the counter. But she knew he wouldn't call the police. Couldn't, because the men who employed these 2 had connections that reached into every precinct in Boston. I need more time, Lena said, hating the tremor in her voice. Time costs money. The tall one yanked her closer, his breath hot and sour against her face. 50,000 by Friday. 50. Her vision blurred. The loan was 30. Interest, penalties, inconvenience fees. He shrugged. Should have read the contract. I can't. Then we'll take it out of your hide. The short one reached for her, and Lena did the only thing she could think of. She swung the coffee pot still clutched in her free hand. It connected with his temple with a wet crack. He staggered, swore, grabbed her hair, and then a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Let her go. Everything stopped. Adrian Volkov stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression utterly calm. He looked like a man who'd just commented on the weather. But the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. The tall one's grip on Lena's wrist loosened. This doesn't concern you. It does now. You don't know who you're fucking with. Adrian smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Lena had ever seen. I know exactly who sent you. Tell Sergey that if he wants to discuss Lena Carter's debt, he can call me directly. The name, Sergey, hit the 2 men like a punch. The tall one's face went pale. You're Adrian Volkov. He said it like he was introducing himself at a dinner party. And you're leaving. They left. Lena stood frozen, her heart slamming against her ribs as the door swung shut behind them. The cafe remained silent. Then, slowly, conversations resumed. Marco turned back to the register. Mrs. Chen sipped her coffee, as if nothing had happened. Adrian stepped closer. His hand, warm, steady, closed gently around her wrist where the bruises were already forming. Are you hurt? Lena shook her head. She didn't trust her voice. They'll come back, Adrian said quietly. Not here. Somewhere private. Somewhere they can take their time. I know. Do you have somewhere safe to go? She almost laughed. Safe? She lived in a 4th-floor walk-up with a broken lock and neighbors who'd learned to ignore screams. I'll figure it out. Adrian released her wrist. He reached into his jacket again, and this time he pulled out a slim black wallet. He counted out $500 bills and placed them on the counter. Take the rest of the day off, he said. Go somewhere public. Stay visible. I can't. Yes, you can. His eyes held hers, and for the first time she saw something behind the ice. Not warmth exactly, but something close to it. And when they come, not if, when, you call the number I gave you. Why are you helping me? The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it, head tilted slightly as if he'd never been asked before. Because no one helped me, he said finally, and I remember what that felt like. Then he walked out, leaving Lena standing in the middle of Moretti's cafe with $500 in her hand and the certainty that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. She didn't go somewhere public. She went to the hospital. Massachusetts General was a 40-minute train ride from the cafe, and Lena spent every second of it staring at the black business card in her hand. The number gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and she wondered what would happen if she called it, what Adrian Volkov would ask for in return. Men like him didn't give without taking. She knew that, had learned it the hard way. But when she walked into room 507 and saw her mother, pale and fragile and so much smaller than she used to be, Lena understood that she was out of options. Baby. Her mother's voice was a whisper, roughened by months of chemotherapy. You're early. Lena forced a smile and sat in the chair beside the bed. Slow morning. A lie, but a necessary one. Her mother, Margaret Carter, once a high school English teacher with a laugh that could fill a room, reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold. You look tired. I'm fine, Mom. Liar. But Margaret smiled, and for a moment she looked like herself again. Talk to me. What's going on? Lena hesitated. She'd kept so much from her mother over the past year. The debt, the threats, the slow, grinding terror of knowing she was drowning and there was no shore in sight. But looking at Margaret now, at the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them fed, who'd never once complained even when the world was cruel, Lena couldn't hold it in anymore. I'm scared, she whispered. Margaret's grip tightened. Of what? Everything. And then, haltingly, she told her. Not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough. The loan, the collectors, the escalating threats. Margaret listened in silence, her expression shifting from shock to fury to something that looked like heartbreak. You should have told me, she said when Lena finished. You were sick. I'm your mother. I'm never too sick for this. Margaret pulled her close, and Lena buried her face in her mother's shoulder and let herself cry for the first time in months. We'll figure it out, together. There's nothing to figure out. I don't have $50,000. Then we go to the police. They won't help. These people, they're connected, Mom. They're untouchable. Margaret pulled back, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion etched into her face. No one is untouchable. Lena thought of Adrian Volkov, of the way 2 armed men had fled at the mention of his name. Maybe her mother was wrong. She stayed until visiting hours ended, then took the train back to her apartment. It was nearly 8 by the time she climbed the 4 flights of stairs and unlocked her door, and the exhaustion had settled into her bones like concrete. The apartment was small, a studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a mattress on the floor because she'd sold the bed frame 3 months ago. But it was hers, or it had been, before the debt. Now it felt like a cage. Lena locked the door, both the deadbolt and the chain, and leaned against it, eyes closed. Her wrist throbbed where the tall man had grabbed her. Her head ached, and somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the exhaustion, anger was starting to kindle. She was so goddamn tired of being afraid. The anger carried her through a shower, through a meal of instant noodles eaten standing at the counter, through the motions of getting ready for bed. And when she finally lay down on the mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, she pulled out the black business card one more time. She didn't call, not yet, but she kept it on the floor beside her pillow, close enough to grab. Just in case, so they came at 2 in the morning. Lena woke to the sound of splintering wood and the crash of her door slamming open. She bolted upright, heart in her throat, as 3 figures filled the doorway. Not the same men from the cafe. These were worse. The first one was massive, well over 6 feet, with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. The second was wiry, quick, with the jittery energy of someone who enjoyed his work too much. The third stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Lena Carter. The big one's voice was flat, bored. You owe us money. She scrambled backward, her hands scrabbling for the phone on the floor. Get out! The wiry one moved faster than she expected. He crossed the room in 3 steps and ripped the phone from her hand, hurling it against the wall. It shattered. "No cops," he said, grinning. "No witnesses, just you and us." Lena's mind raced. The fire escape. If she could get to the window. The big one grabbed her ankle and dragged her off the mattress. She hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. Before she could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth. 50,000, the big one said, hauling her upright. "You got it?" She shook her head frantically. "Didn't think so." He nodded to the wiry one, who produced a lighter from his pocket. "Guess we'll have to get creative." Lena's vision tunneled. This was it. This was how she died. And then her gaze landed on the black business card, half hidden under the edge of the mattress. The big one followed her eyes, frowned. "What's that?" He bent to pick it up, and in that split second of distraction, Lena wrenched free. She lunged for the card, her fingers closing around it just as the wiry one grabbed her hair and slammed her into the wall. Pain exploded through her skull. She tasted blood. But she had the card. Her phone was broken, but her laptop, old, half dead, but functional, sat on the floor by the kitchenette. She twisted, kicked, fought with everything she had, and somehow broke free long enough to grab it. The wiry one caught her again, zip-tying her wrists behind her back this time. But her fingers were already flying across the keyboard, typing one-handed, clumsy, and desperate. She found the number, opened her email, typed a single word, "Help," and hit send. The laptop was ripped away. The wiry one slapped her hard enough to split her lip. "Who'd you contact?" Lena didn't answer. Couldn't. Her ears were ringing. The big one checked the laptop, then laughed. She emailed some random number, probably a wrong address. He tossed the laptop aside. "Doesn't matter. No one's coming." But then Lena's inbox chimed. A new message from the number she'd contacted. The big one opened it, and his expression changed. "Don't make a sound. 4 minutes." For a moment, no one moved. Then the one in the doorway spoke for the first time. "Who the fuck did you contact?" Lena smiled through the blood. "Someone you don't want to meet." The wiry one backhanded her again, and this time she went down hard. Her vision swam. She heard them arguing, heard the panic creeping into their voices, but it felt distant, unreal. 4 minutes. She just had to survive 4 minutes. The big one hauled her into the bathroom and shoved her into the tub. "We'll finish this quick," he said, "before whoever she called shows up." The lighter flicked open. Lena closed her eyes and started counting. 1, 2, 3. The seconds stretched like taffy. The flame danced closer. 30, 40, 50. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Shouts. 60, 70. The apartment door, already broken, exploded inward for the second time that night. And Adrian Volkov walked in like the wrath of a silent god. He wasn't alone. 4 men flanked him, all armed, all moving with the kind of precision that spoke of military training. They swept through the apartment in seconds, disarming Lena's attackers before any of them could react. The wiry one tried to run. He made it 3 steps before one of Adrian's men put him on the floor with a knee to his spine. The big one reached for a weapon. Adrian caught his wrist, twisted, and the sound of breaking bone echoed through the small space. The man screamed. Adrian didn't flinch. He stepped into the bathroom, and his eyes found Lena in the tub, wrists bound, blood on her face, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Something flickered across his expression, something dark and dangerous. He crouched beside her, his hands gentle as he cut the zip ties with a knife that appeared from nowhere. "Are you hurt?" Lena tried to speak, failed, tried again. They wanted... "I know." His voice was soft, lethal. "It's over now." He helped her stand, his arm around her waist when her legs threatened to give out. And then he walked her past the 3 men now kneeling in her living room, past his own people standing guard, and out into the hallway. "Wait," Lena managed. What's going to happen to them?" Adrian glanced back. His expression was unreadable. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether they're smart enough to take my advice." He led her down the stairs, and Lena didn't look back. Didn't want to know what advice Adrian Volkov gave to men who broke into women's apartments at 2 a.m. Didn't want to know what happened to people who ignored it. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. Adrian opened the door for her, and Lena hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." I don't even know you. No, Adrian agreed. But I know you. And I know that if you stay here, you'll be dead by morning. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact, delivered in the same calm tone he used to order coffee. Lena looked up at her apartment building, at the broken window, the shattered door, the life she'd been clinging to with bloody fingernails. Then she got in the car. Adrian slid in beside her, and the driver pulled away from the curb without a word. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, and Lena realized she was still shaking. Your mother, Adrian said quietly. She's at Mass General, room 507. Lena's head snapped toward him. How do you... I'll have someone watching her. She'll be safe. Why are you doing this? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because I can. It wasn't an answer, not really. But as the car carried her away from everything she knew, toward a future she couldn't predict, Lena realized it was the only answer that mattered. The car smelled like leather and something expensive Lena couldn't identify. Cedar, maybe, or sandalwood. She pressed herself against the door as far from Adrian as the confined space allowed, and tried to stop her hands from shaking. They'd been driving for 20 minutes, winding through streets she didn't recognize, moving steadily away from the cramped chaos of her neighborhood toward something else entirely. The buildings outside grew taller, cleaner, their windows glowing with warm light that spoke of lives she'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. Adrian hadn't spoken since they left. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting on his knee, his expression carved from stone. But Lena could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from asphalt in summer. Where are we going? She asked again. Her voice sounded small in the quiet. My home. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. He glanced at her, and something in his eyes softened fractionally. I need to make some calls. Ensure certain arrangements are made. Then we'll talk. Arrangements, Lena repeated. The word tasted like rust. What kind of arrangements? The kind that keep you breathing. The car turned onto a tree-lined street where the houses sat back from the road behind iron gates and manicured lawns. Lena's stomach twisted. This wasn't just wealth. This was the kind of money that built empires and crushed anyone who got in the way. The driver pulled up to a gate that opened automatically, revealing a circular driveway and a house that looked like it had been transplanted from a European postcard. 3 stories of pale stone and tall windows, with ivy climbing the eastern wall and lights glowing warm against the darkness. Lena's entire apartment could have fit in the entryway. The car stopped. Adrian opened his door and extended a hand to help her out. She ignored it and climbed out on her own, her legs unsteady beneath her. This way. Adrian's voice was gentle, but it wasn't a request. She followed him up the steps and through a front door that opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that assessed Lena in a single glance. Irina, Adrian said. This is Lena Carter. She'll be staying with us for a while. Irina's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed. Of course. Shall I prepare the guest room? Please, and have Dr. Petrov come by in the morning. She's injured? Minor. Adrian's jaw tightened. But I want her checked. Lena found her voice. I don't need a doctor. You're bleeding, Adrian said quietly, gesturing to her face. And you've been through trauma. You need rest and medical attention. Both are non-negotiable. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she'd survived worse with nothing but ice and spite, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the adrenaline was fading, and the thought of a bed, a real bed, not a mattress on a floor, made her bones ache with longing. Fine, she whispered. Irina nodded once and disappeared down a hallway. Adrian gestured for Lena to follow him in the opposite direction, through a living room that looked like something from a magazine, all clean lines and carefully chosen art, and into a study lined with books. He closed the door behind them and crossed to a bar cart in the corner. Do you drink? Not usually. Tonight might be an exception. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and held one out to her. It'll help with the shaking. Lena took it because her hands needed something to hold. The first sip burned her throat and brought tears to her eyes, but the warmth that followed was almost worth it. Adrian leaned against the desk, studying her over the rim of his own glass. How much do you know about the people you borrowed from? Enough to know I made a mistake. That's an understatement. He set his glass down. The organization you're dealing with, they're not small-time loan sharks. They're part of a network that stretches from here to Moscow, run by a man named Sergei Kozlov. He controls most of the illegal lending operations in Boston, along with a dozen other enterprises I won't detail. Lena's stomach dropped. And you know this because Sergei and I have history. What kind of history? Adrian's smile was sharp enough to cut. The kind where we've agreed not to kill each other as long as we stay out of each other's way. The casual mention of killing should have terrified her. Instead, Lena felt something close to hysteria bubble up in her chest. And me? Where do I fit into this agreement? You don't, which is the problem. He straightened, his expression growing serious. When I paid your debt tonight, I didn't just clear a loan. I publicly claimed you as someone under my protection. In Sergei's world, that's a direct challenge. So you made it worse. I made it complicated. Adrian moved closer, and Lena forced herself not to step back. If I'd done nothing, you'd be dead. If I'd paid quietly, they would have come back for more. This way, with witnesses, with a clear message, they know the cost of touching you. Which is? War. The word hung between them like a blade. Lena drained the rest of her drink in one burning gulp and set the glass on the nearest shelf with a hand that trembled. I didn't ask for this. I know. I didn't ask for you to save me. I know that too. Then why? The question came out louder than she intended, raw with frustration and fear and exhaustion. Why would you risk a war for someone you don't even know? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward her. The photograph showed a young woman, maybe 18, with dark hair and eyes that looked too old for her face. She was smiling, but there was something brittle about it, something that suggested the smile was a mask over deeper pain. Her name was Katya, Adrian said softly. My sister. 15 years ago, she borrowed money from men like the ones who came after you tonight. She was trying to pay for our mother's surgery. I was overseas, working, sending money when I could. But it wasn't enough, and the debt grew faster than she could handle. Lena's throat tightened. What happened? They killed her. Made it look like suicide. His voice was flat, empty of emotion, but his hand trembled slightly as he put the phone away. I found her 3 days later, and I learned a valuable lesson about what happens when you're powerless. You're not powerless now. No. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw the full weight of what lived behind them. And I swore I'd never watch someone else drown when I had the means to pull them out. Lena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the fact that this man, this dangerous, controlled man, had just handed her a piece of his past like it was something fragile. I'm sorry, she whispered finally. Don't be. Just stay alive. He moved to the door and opened it. Irina will show you to your room. We'll talk more in the morning. Lena nodded and walked past him, but paused in the doorway. Adrian? Yes? Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. He didn't smile, but something in his expression softened. Get some rest, Lena. Irina was waiting in the hallway, and she led Lena up a wide staircase to the second floor without speaking. The guest room was larger than Lena's entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a castle and windows overlooking a garden she couldn't see in the darkness. There are clothes in the closet, Irina said, her accent thick but her English precise. Your size, I think. Bathroom is through there. If you need anything, press the button beside the bed. Thank you. Irina paused at the door, her expression unreadable. He's a good man, you know, Mr. Volkov. He doesn't show it often, but he is. Then she was gone, and Lena was alone. She locked the door, habit, even though she knew it was pointless, and crossed to the bathroom. The mirror showed her a stranger, pale skin, split lip, a bruise blooming across her cheekbone. Her wrists were ringed with red marks from the zip ties, and there was dried blood in her hair. She looked like a victim. The realization ignited something hot and furious in her chest. She'd spent so long being afraid, being small, letting the world grind her down into nothing. And look where it had gotten her. Lena stripped off her ruined clothes and stepped into the shower, letting water hot enough to hurt wash away the blood and the fear and the feeling of hands grabbing her in the dark. And when she finally stepped out, skin pink and raw, she made herself a promise. She was done being a victim. Whatever happened next, war, danger, the weight of Adrian Volkov's protection, she would face it standing up. She found pajamas in the closet, silk and impossibly soft, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was like sleeping on a cloud, and despite everything, despite the violence and the terror and the complete upheaval of her life, Lena fell asleep almost instantly. For the first time in months, she didn't dream. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from somewhere below. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night crashed back in, and she sat up too fast, her head spinning. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Lena called, her voice rough with sleep. Irina entered carrying a tray laden with breakfast, fresh fruit, toast, eggs cooked perfectly, and a pot of coffee that smelled like heaven. "Good morning. Dr. Petrov will be here in an hour. Mr. Volkov asks that you eat first." "Where's he?" "Handling business." Irina set the tray on the bedside table. "He said to tell you he'll see you this afternoon." Alina wanted to ask what kind of business, but something in Irina's expression suggested she wouldn't get an answer. "Thank you." Irina nodded and left, and Lena forced herself to eat even though anxiety had stolen her appetite. The food was incredible, better than anything she'd tasted in years, but every bite felt like swallowing stones. Dr. Petrov arrived exactly an hour later. He was older, professorial, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that were surprisingly gentle as he examined her injuries. He cleaned the cut on her lip, applied ointment to the bruises, and checked her pupils with a small light. "No concussion," he said finally. "The injuries are superficial. You'll heal quickly." He paused. "You're very lucky." Lucky. Lena almost laughed, but she thanked him instead, and he left her with a bottle of pain medication and instructions to rest. Rest, as if that was possible. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the house, if only to keep from going insane. It was enormous, far too large for one person, with rooms that looked like they'd never been used and artwork that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. But there were also small details that spoke of an actual life. A well-worn book on the side table in the library, a jacket draped over a chair in the study, a photo on the mantle of a young Adrian with an older woman who had his eyes. Lena was staring at the photo when she heard footsteps behind her. "That's my mother," Adrian said. "Taken a year before she died." Lena turned. He stood in the doorway, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a gray sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. He looked tired. "She was beautiful," Lena said. "She was fierce." Adrian crossed to the mantel and picked up the photo, his thumb brushing over the glass. "She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed after my father left. Killed herself doing it." He set the photo down carefully. "I was 16 when the cancer took her. Katya was 14. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But the way he said it suggested time hadn't healed that particular wound. Lena took a breath. "What happens now?" "Now we wait." "For what?" "For Sergei to make his next move." Adrian gestured for her to follow him into the study. "I've had people watching his operation since last night. So far, nothing unusual, but he won't let this go. The question is how he'll respond. And while we wait, I just... What? Hide here? You rest. You heal. And you let me handle this." Lena shook her head. "I can't just sit here while you fight my battles." "This stopped being just your battle the moment I stepped in." Adrian's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Sergei's been looking for an excuse to test me for years. You're just the catalyst." "Great. So I'm a catalyst for a mob war. If it helps, it was probably inevitable." He almost smiled. "At least this way it's over something that matters." "What do you mean?" "I mean, most wars in our world start over territory or money or pride. This one starts because someone needed help, and I chose to give it." He met her eyes. "I can live with that." Before Lena could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Your mother. She's asking for you." Panic spiked through her. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. But she knows you didn't come home last night, and the hospital called me because you listed this address on her medical forms." He paused. "I had them updated, for safety." "You did what?" "I told you I'd protect her. That means making sure anyone looking for leverage against you can't find her through hospital records." He pocketed the phone. "Get dressed. We're going to see her." Lena wanted to argue about him making decisions without consulting her, but the need to see her mother, to know she was safe, overrode everything else. She hurried upstairs and changed into clothes from the closet, dark jeans and a sweater that fit perfectly, and tried not to think about how Adrian had known her size. 20 minutes later, they were in the car, cutting through traffic toward the hospital. Adrian made 3 phone calls during the drive, all in Russian, his voice clipped and commanding. Lena caught the word Sergei twice and decided she didn't want to know the details. Mass General looked the same as always, bustling, sterile, filled with the particular smell of antiseptic and anxiety that all hospitals shared. But when they stepped off the elevator on the 5th floor, Lena noticed the man in the dark suit standing near the nurse's station. He nodded to Adrian, who nodded back. "One of yours?" Lena asked quietly. "For now." They walked to room 507, and Lena pushed open the door to find her mother sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in weeks. The color was back in her cheeks, and her eyes were bright with something that looked like cautious hope. "Lena," Margaret's relief was palpable. "I was so worried." "I'm fine, Mom." Lena crossed to the bed and took her mother's hand. "I'm sorry I didn't call." Margaret's gaze shifted to Adrian, who stood in the doorway. "And you are?" "Adrian Volkov." He inclined his head. "A friend of your daughter's." "A friend." Margaret's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second, but she was too polite to say it. "Well, Mr. Volkov, thank you for bringing her." "Of course." An awkward silence fell. Then Margaret squeezed Lena's hand. "The doctor came by this morning. They're moving me to a new treatment plan, something experimental, but with a much higher success rate." Lena's heart jumped. "What? How?" "I don't know. They said an anonymous donor covered the cost." Margaret's eyes glistened. "It's a miracle." Lena turned to look at Adrian, who was studying the floor with great interest. "Did you—" "We should let your mother rest," Adrian said smoothly. "Doctor's orders." But Margaret wasn't letting him off that easily. "Mr. Volkov, might I have a word with you? Alone?" Adrian's expression flickered with something that might have been panic, but he nodded. "Of course." Lena wanted to protest, but her mother's look was one she knew better than to argue with. She kissed Margaret's forehead and stepped into the hallway, leaving the door cracked. She shouldn't have eavesdropped, but she did. "I don't know what your intentions are with my daughter," Margaret said, her voice low but fierce. "And I won't pretend to understand why a man like you would involve himself in our lives. But if you hurt her, if you use her for whatever game you're playing, I promise you'll regret it." There was a pause. Then Adrian's voice, softer than Lena had ever heard it. "I have no intention of hurting her, Mrs. Carter. And this isn't a game." "Then what is it?" "A chance to do something right." Another silence. Then Margaret spoke again, and this time her voice was gentler. "She's been through so much already, more than anyone her age should have to bear. She puts on a brave face, but she's scared, lost." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're offering her protection, but protection always comes with a price." "Not this time." "I want to believe you." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "But I'm her mother. It's my job to worry." "Then worry. But know that I would rather die than let anyone hurt her again." The conviction in his voice sent chills down Lena's spine. She stepped away from the door before she could hear more, her heart pounding. A minute later, Adrian emerged. His expression was carefully neutral, but there was a tightness around his eyes that suggested Margaret had gotten to him. "Ready?" he asked. Lena nodded, and they walked back to the elevator in silence. It wasn't until they were in the car, pulling away from the hospital, that she spoke. "You paid for the treatment." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Adrian, your mother is sick. The treatment has a high success rate. That's all that matters. He looked out the window. Consider it an investment in her recovery. Why? Because you love her, and because no one should have to choose between saving someone they love and destroying their own life. Lena felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. I don't know how to repay you. I don't want repayment. Everyone wants something. Not from you. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I told you, this isn't about debt or obligation. It's about doing the right thing. People like you don't do things without a reason. People like me? His lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. What kind of person do you think I am, Lena? She considered the question seriously. Dangerous. Powerful. Someone who's used to getting what he wants. All true. But also someone who loved his sister enough to never forget her, who pays for strangers' medical treatments, who sits in a cafe every morning drinking espresso he probably doesn't even like. Adrian's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across it before he could hide it. I like the coffee. Liar. This time he did smile, and it transformed his face. Maybe a little. They drove in companionable silence for a while, and Lena watched the city slide past outside the window. She should have been terrified, should have been planning her escape, but instead she felt oddly safe sitting beside this man who'd turned her life upside down. What happens when Sergei makes his move? She asked finally. We deal with it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Adrian's phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it. His expression darkened. But we might find out sooner than I thought. What's wrong? Sergei wants to meet. Lena's stomach dropped. When? Tonight. Are you going? I don't have a choice. He looked at her. But you're staying at the house, behind locked doors, with guards. I'm not helpless. I know you're not. But I also know Sergei. And I won't give him any opportunity to use you against me. His voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. This is non-negotiable. Lena wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. They returned to the house, and Adrian disappeared into his study with his phone pressed to his ear. Lena wandered restlessly through the rooms, too anxious to sit still, until Irina found her in the library. He'll be fine, the older woman said quietly. He's survived worse than Sergei Kozlov. How do you know what I'm thinking? Because I've seen that look before, on every woman who's ever cared about him. Irina's smile was sad. He inspires loyalty, that one, even when he doesn't mean to. I barely know him. Knowing and understanding are different things. You understand him. That's rarer than you think. Before Lena could respond, Adrian appeared in the doorway. He'd changed into a black suit that made him look even more intimidating than usual, and there was a coldness in his expression that hadn't been there before. This was the man who'd made two armed thugs flee at the mention of his name. I'm leaving, he said. Dmitri and Alexei will be outside. Don't answer the door for anyone. Adrian, I'll be back before midnight. He hesitated, then crossed to her and did something completely unexpected. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. Don't worry. This is just a conversation. Conversations don't usually require armed guards. Mine do. He released her hand and stepped back. Stay safe, Lena. Then he was gone, and Lena was left standing in the library with her heart in her throat and the certainty that nothing about tonight was going to be simple. The hours crawled past. She tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to eat the dinner Irina prepared, but her mind kept circling back to Adrian, sitting across from a man who controlled half of Boston's criminal underworld, negotiating over her life like it was a business transaction. At 11:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He's safe. On his way back. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. 20 minutes later, she heard the front door open and footsteps in the hallway. She met Adrian in the foyer. He looked tired but unharmed, and some of the tension drained from her shoulders. Well? She asked. We have a truce. Temporary, but binding. He loosened his tie. Sergei has agreed to forgive your debt and leave you alone. Relief flooded through her. That's incredible. In exchange for a favor. The relief curdled. What kind of favor? One I'll handle. It doesn't concern you. Adrian, if you made a deal because of me, I made a deal to keep you alive, and I do it again. He met her eyes. This changes nothing between us, Lena. You're still under my protection. You're still safe. But you're not. I'm always in danger. It's the life I chose. He moved past her toward the stairs, then paused. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. But Lena couldn't rest. Not with the weight of his sacrifice sitting heavy on her chest. Not with the knowledge that he'd traded something, maybe something terrible, to save her. She climbed the stairs to her room and stood at the window, looking out over the dark garden. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she let herself cry. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the devastating realization that Adrian Volkov had just become the most important person in her life, and she had no idea how to protect him in return. The tears dried eventually, leaving salt tracks on Lena's cheeks and a hollow ache in her chest that wouldn't fade. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and turned away from the window, exhaustion finally pulling her toward the bed. But sleep felt impossible, her mind racing with images of Adrian sitting across from Sergei Kozlov, negotiating away pieces of himself to keep her safe. She didn't understand it, couldn't wrap her head around why someone with his power, his resources, his carefully constructed world would risk any of it for a waitress drowning in debt. His explanation about his sister made sense on the surface, but Lena suspected there was something deeper, something he wasn't saying. The house creaked and settled around her, unfamiliar sounds that kept her nerves on edge. She counted the minutes on the clock beside the bed, midnight, 12:30, 1, until finally her body surrendered and she fell into restless sleep. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee again, but this time she felt different, steadier. The tears had cleared something inside her, washed away some of the fear and left behind something harder. Something that felt almost like resolve. Lena showered and dressed in jeans and a simple black sweater, then made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, but she could hear voices coming from the study. Adrian's low rumble and another man's sharper tones speaking rapid Russian. She hesitated in the hallway, uncertain whether to interrupt, when Irina appeared from the kitchen. "Breakfast is ready," the older woman said. "Mr. Volkov asked that you eat. He'll join you when he's finished." "Who's he talking to?" "Dmitri, his head of security." Irina's expression was carefully neutral. "They're discussing the arrangements." "What arrangements?" "You'll have to ask him." Lena followed Irina into a dining room she hadn't seen before, smaller and warmer than the formal space she'd glimpsed the previous day. A table was set for two, laden with fresh bread, fruit, eggs, and pastries that looked homemade. "Did you make all this?" Lena asked. Irina smiled. "Cooking helps me think, and there's been much to think about lately. Because of me. Because of many things. You're just the most recent." Irina poured coffee into a delicate china cup, but also perhaps the most important. Before Lena could ask what that meant, the study door opened and Adrian emerged with a man who looked like he could break concrete with his bare hands. Dmitri was massive, with a shaved head and eyes that assessed Lena with the same clinical precision a surgeon might use examining a patient. "This is her?" Dmitri asked in accented English. "Yes." Adrian's tone carried a warning. "Lena, this is Dmitri Sokolov. He handles security." Lena met Dmitri's gaze directly. "Nice to meet you." Something that might have been approval flickered across Dmitri's face. "Likewise." He turned to Adrian. "I'll have the team in place by tonight. 3 shifts, overlapping coverage. No one gets close without our knowledge." "Good. And the other matter?" "Being handled." Dmitri's expression darkened. "But we need to talk about the timeline. Sergei won't wait forever." "I know. Give me 48 hours." Dmitri nodded and left through the front door. Adrian watched him go, tension evident in the set of his shoulders, then turned to find Lena watching him. "Hungry?" he asked, as if they'd just been discussing the weather. "Starving." It was only half a lie. "But first, I need you to tell me what favor you owe Sergei." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." "Like hell it isn't. You made that deal because of me. I made it because it was necessary." He moved past her into the dining room and sat at the table, pouring himself coffee with steady hands. "And the details don't matter. They matter to me. Why?" He looked up at her, genuine curiosity in his eyes. "Why does it matter what I promised him?" Lena sat across from him, her hands clenched in her lap. Because I'm not used to people sacrificing things for me. Because every time someone has given me something, they've expected payment. Because... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Because you don't trust it, Adrian finished softly. You don't trust that someone would help you without wanting something in return. Can you blame me? No. He took a sip of coffee, considering her over the rim of the cup. But I'm not everyone else, Lena, and the sooner you understand that, the easier this will be. What exactly is this? You, living here, under my protection. Until the situation with Sergei stabilizes, and I'm certain you're safe. He set the cup down. Which means we need to establish some ground rules. Lena bristled. I'm not a child. I know. But you are someone who's now living in a world you don't understand, surrounded by dangers you can't see. So you'll forgive me if I insist on a few parameters. His voice was firm, but not unkind. First, you don't leave the property without telling me or Dmitri. Second, you don't speak to anyone about our arrangement or what happened with the loan sharks. Third, if something feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately. And in exchange? In exchange, you're alive. You're safe. And your mother gets the treatment she needs. He leaned back in his chair. I'm not asking you to be a prisoner, Lena. I'm asking you to be smart. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she'd been taking care of herself for years and didn't need his rules or his protection. But the memory of zip ties cutting into her wrists and a lighter flame inches from her skin was still too fresh. Fine, she said finally, but I need something from you too. What? Honesty. If I'm going to live here, if I'm going to trust you, I need to know what's really going on. No more vague answers or half-truths. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and Lena had the distinct impression he was weighing how much to reveal. Then he nodded, just once. Fair enough. Ask your questions. What did you promise, Sergei? Information. There's someone in his organization he suspects of betrayal, but he can't prove it. I have resources he doesn't, contacts, surveillance capabilities, ways of gathering intelligence without leaving traces. In exchange for your debt and his agreement to leave you alone, I've promised to identify the traitor. Lena's stomach twisted. And what happens to this person when you find them? That's Sergei's concern, not mine. But you know what he'll do. Yes. And you're okay with that? Adrian's expression didn't change. I'm okay with you being alive. Everything else is secondary. The casual way he said it should have horrified her. Instead, Lena felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He pushed his coffee aside and stood. I need to make some calls. Eat. Then we'll talk about what comes next. He left before she could respond, and Lena sat alone in the dining room staring at the untouched food. Irina appeared in the doorway, her expression knowing. He's not like other men, the older woman said quietly. He doesn't know how to be gentle, doesn't understand that sometimes people need comfort instead of solutions. But his heart is good, even if he's forgotten how to show it. How long have you worked for him? 15 years, since just after his mother died. Irina moved to the table and began filling a plate for Lena. He was barely more than a boy then, trying to hold his world together with nothing but will and fury. I helped raise him and Katya after that. You knew his sister. She was like my own daughter. Pain flickered across Irina's face. Beautiful girl, smart. But the world was cruel to her, and she didn't know how to be cruel back. Not like Adrian. Is that what it takes? Being cruel? In his world? Yes. Irina set the plate in front of Lena. But with you, I think he's trying to remember another way, so be patient with him. Lena picked at the food, her appetite gone. Irina, what happens if Sergei doesn't keep his word? Then Adrian will make him regret breaking it. The certainty in her voice should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded Lena just how deep she'd fallen into a world where violence was currency and mercy was a weakness. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the grounds, carefully, within sight of the house, where Dmitri's men could see her. The property was larger than she'd realized, stretching back to a small wooded area that felt like stepping out of the city entirely. There was a garden that had been maintained with obvious care, roses and lavender and herbs she didn't recognize. She was examining a rose bush when Adrian found her. "You like gardens?" he asked. Lena turned. He changed into more casual clothes again, and in the afternoon light he looked younger, less intimidating. "My grandmother had one, before she died. I used to help her plant bulbs in the fall." "These were my mother's." Adrian touched one of the roses, his fingers gentle against the petals. "She said that growing things reminded her that not everything in the world was harsh, that beauty could survive if you protected it." "Do you believe that?" "I want to." He dropped his hand. "I've asked Irina to set up a space for you, an office if you want to continue your studies, or just a quiet place to be alone, whatever you need." The gesture caught her off guard. "I can't afford to go back to school right now." "Your tuition has been paid, for the full program." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Before you argue, understand that this isn't charity. You want to be a nurse, you should be a nurse. And I have the means to make that happen, so I'm making it happen." "Adrian, that's too much. It's nothing." He said it like he meant it. "Money is just a tool, Lena. I'd rather use it for something that matters." She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process this man who could orchestrate violence with one hand and pay for nursing school with the other. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I can. Because I want to. Because—" He stopped, something shifting in his expression. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth saving, and I haven't felt that way about anyone in a very long time." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Lena's heart was pounding, and she wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. Adrian seemed to feel it too, because he stepped back, putting distance between them. "I should get back to work. Dmitri will be here if you need anything." He walked away before she could respond, and Lena was left standing among the roses, trying to make sense of the tangle of emotions in her chest. The afternoon bled into evening, and Lena found herself in the library Irina had mentioned. A smaller room on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a window seat that overlooked the garden. Someone, probably Irina, had left nursing textbooks on the desk, along with a laptop and a note in elegant handwriting, "For your studies." Lena sat at the desk and opened one of the books, but the words blurred together. Her mind kept drifting to Adrian, to the way he'd looked at her in the garden, to the careful distance he maintained even as he upended her entire life to keep her safe. She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your mother's treatment is going well. First round complete. Doctors are optimistic." Alina stared at the message, warmth spreading through her chest. He was monitoring her mother's care, keeping her updated, treating Margaret's recovery like it was as important as any business deal. She typed a response. "Thank you." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on your studies and stay safe." Lena smiled despite herself. Even over text, he was giving orders. "Yes, sir." The response came faster this time. "I'm not that much older than you. Could have fooled me with all the commanding. It's a habit, occupational hazard." Being bossy? Keeping people alive. The lightness in the exchange felt fragile, precious, like they were both testing the boundaries of something neither wanted to name. "Well, I'm alive. Mission accomplished. For now. Don't get cocky." Lena was trying to formulate a response when her door opened without warning. She looked up to find Dmitri in the doorway, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said. Her stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where you need to come with me. Now." Lena followed him down the stairs and into Adrian's study, where Adrian stood behind his desk with his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was carved from stone, but his eyes were blazing. "I understand," he said into the phone, his voice deadly calm. "Tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes. And tell him if he's touched her, there won't be negotiations." He ended the call and looked at Lena. "Sergei has your mother." The world tilted. "What?" "Someone took her from the hospital 20 minutes ago. Sergei's people. He's using her as leverage to renegotiate our agreement." Adrian's hands were clenched into fists. "He wants to meet, tonight. And he wants you there." "Then I'm going—" Absolutely not." Adrian moved around the desk. "That's exactly what he wants. You walk into that meeting and I lose all my leverage. I don't care about leverage. That's my mother. I know. His voice softened fractionally, which is why I'm going to get her back. But I need you to trust me, Lena. I need you to stay here where you're protected while I handle this. Lena shook her head, panic clawing at her throat. He could kill her. He won't. Not until he has what he wants. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. Sergei is testing me, seeing if I'll break our agreement to save your mother. If I show up with you, he wins. But if I go alone, if I make it clear that you're still under my protection and he's crossed a line, then I have a chance of getting her back unharmed. And if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I've known Sergei for 15 years. I know how he thinks. And I know that right now, your mother is more valuable to him alive than dead. Lena wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but the terror was overwhelming, drowning out logic. Please, she whispered, don't let anything happen to her. I won't. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, the gesture unexpectedly intimate. I swear to you, Lena, I will bring her home. Then he was pulling away, already moving toward the door. Dmitri fell into step beside him, and Lena heard them conferring in low voices as they walked to the car. She stood frozen in the study, her heart hammering, until Irina appeared and guided her to the living room. Sit, the older woman commanded gently. I'll make tea. I don't want tea. I want my mother safe. Then we wait, and we trust that Adrian knows what he's doing. Irina sat beside her and took her hand. He survived worse than Sergei Kozlov, child. He'll survive this too. But it wasn't Adrian's survival Lena was worried about. The minutes crawled past like hours. Lena paced the living room, unable to sit still, her mind conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios. What if Sergei didn't care about negotiations? What if he hurt Margaret just to prove a point? What if Adrian walked into a trap? At 11 o'clock, Dmitri called. Irina answered and listened in silence, then hung up. Adrian has her, she said. They're on their way back. The relief was so intense Lena's knees buckled. She sat heavily on the couch, tears streaming down her face. Is she hurt? Dmitri didn't say. But they're coming home. 30 minutes later, Lena heard the car in the driveway. She ran to the front door and yanked it open to find Adrian helping Margaret out of the back seat. Her mother looked pale and shaken, but unharmed, and when she saw Lena, she burst into tears. Lena ran down the steps and threw her arms around her mother, holding on like she might disappear. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, baby. Just scared. Margaret pulled back, her hands framing Lena's face. What is going on? Who are these people? It's a long story. Lena glanced at Adrian, who stood a few feet away, watching them with an unreadable expression. But we're safe now. That's what matters. Adrian stepped forward. Mrs. Carter, I'm having you moved to a private facility. Better security, better care. The transfer will happen tonight. I don't understand. You don't need to. You just need to trust that I will keep you safe. Both of you. His voice was gentle but firm. The hospital isn't secure, Sergei proved that tonight. But the facility I'm sending you to is. No one will touch you there. Margaret looked between them, confusion and fear warring on her face. But then she nodded slowly. All right, if that's what needs to happen. It is. Adrian gestured to one of his men. Victor will take you there now. Dr. Petrov will meet you and continue your treatment. Can Lena come with me? Tomorrow. Tonight she stays here. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. Margaret looked like she wanted to protest, but Lena squeezed her hand. It's okay, Mom. I'll come see you first thing in the morning, I promise. Okay. Margaret hugged her again, fierce and tight. I love you, baby. I love you too. Then Victor was helping Margaret into another car, and Lena watched until the taillights disappeared down the drive. When she turned back, Adrian was already walking toward the house. She followed him into the study and closed the door behind them. What happened? She demanded. What did Sergei want? Adrian poured himself a drink, his movements controlled but tense. He wanted to renegotiate, said the favor I'd promised wasn't enough, that protecting you and your mother required more. What did you give him? Something I didn't want to give. He drained the glass in one swallow. but something I couldn't refuse. Adrian, it's done, Lena. Your mother is safe. You're safe. That's all that matters. It's not all that matters. She crossed to him, frustration boiling over. You keep making these sacrifices and refusing to tell me what they cost. You keep acting like I'm just some damsel who needs saving, but I'm not. I know you're not. Adrian set the glass down with a sharp click. But right now, I need you to understand something. Sergei took your mother to prove a point, to show me that he could touch the people I care about whenever he wanted. And I had to make him understand that there are consequences for that. What kind of consequences? The kind that ensure he never tries it again. Adrian's eyes were cold, empty of anything resembling mercy. I gave him what he wanted, but I also made it clear that if he ever threatens you or your mother again, our agreement is void. And when that happens, he won't live long enough to regret it. The casual promise of violence should have terrified her. Instead, Lena felt something fierce and protective surge through her chest. You can't keep doing this, she said quietly. You can't keep trading pieces of yourself to keep me safe. Why not? Because eventually, there won't be anything left. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You're wrong. There's always something left. As long as you're alive, as long as you're safe, there's always something left. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Lena's breath caught, and she found herself leaning into his touch without meaning to. Adrian's hand stilled against her cheek. His eyes searched hers, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw uncertainty there, vulnerability. Lena, he said softly, if you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to do something we'll both regret. What if I don't regret it? The question surprised them both. Adrian's expression shifted, something dark and hungry flickering across it before he could hide it. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Lena's heart was pounding, but she didn't look away. You've saved my life, protected my mother, given me everything and asked for nothing in return. And all I can think about is how much I want to understand you. How much I want... She didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Adrian closed the distance between them in one fluid motion, his hands framing her face as he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was weeks of tension and fear, an unspoken longing compressed into a single moment, and Lena melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he said, but he didn't let go. Probably. I'm not a good man, Lena. I don't believe that. You should. But his arms tightened around her. I've done things that would make you run screaming, built an empire on blood and fear. I'm exactly the kind of man your mother warned you about. Maybe. Lena pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. But you're also the man who pays for strangers' medical treatments. Who keeps roses alive because they reminded your mother of beauty? Who would rather trade away pieces of himself than watch someone else suffer? That doesn't make me good. It just makes me complicated. I can live with complicated. Adrian laughed, the sound rough and surprised. You're going to destroy me. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. He kissed her again, softer this time, like he was trying to memorize the moment. Then he stepped back, putting careful distance between them. You should get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. Why? Because Sergei is going to escalate. Tonight was just the opening move. Adrian's expression hardened. And I need to be ready for whatever comes next. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to demand that he tell her everything, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves, and she knew he was right. Okay, she said quietly. But Adrian, whatever happens next, we face it together. No more secrets. He nodded, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. Lena walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Thank you for saving my mother. Always. The word was a vow. She climbed the stairs to her room and fell into bed fully clothed, her mind spinning. The kiss had changed something between them, shifted the foundation of whatever fragile thing they were building, and she had no idea if that was wonderful or terrifying. Probably both. Sleep came fitfully, full of dreams where she was running through dark corridors trying to find her mother, while Adrian's voice called her name from somewhere she couldn't reach. She woke to shouting. Lena bolted upright, heart racing, as the sound of raised voices carried up from downstairs. She grabbed her phone, 4 in the morning, and rushed into the hallway. Dimitri met her at the top of the stairs, his expression grim. "Stay in your room." "What's happening?" Adrian's handling it. "Stay in your room." But Lena could hear Adrian's voice now, cold and lethal, speaking rapid Russian. And beneath it, another voice she didn't recognize, pleading. She pushed past Dimitri and ran down the stairs to find Adrian in the foyer with a man on his knees in front of him. The man was bleeding from his nose, his hands bound behind his back, and he was crying. Adrian's gun was pressed to the back of his head. "Adrian," Lena whispered. He turned, and the look in his eyes was nothing she'd seen before. Empty, merciless. The man who'd kissed her hours ago had vanished, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. "Go back upstairs, Lena." "What are you doing?" "Protecting you." He turned back to the man. "This is the traitor, the one Sergei wanted me to find, and now I'm giving him what I promised." Understanding crashed over her. "You can't." "I can. I will." Adrian's voice was flat. "This man sold information that got 3 of my people killed last month. He's been feeding intelligence to Sergei's rivals for over a year, and his punishment is death." "Please," the man sobbed. "Please, I have a family." "So did the people you betrayed." Adrian cocked the gun. "Wait!" Lena ran down the last few steps. "Just wait." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This doesn't concern you." "Yes, it does. Because if you do this, if you kill him here now in front of me, it changes everything." Her voice shook but held steady. "I understand justice. I understand consequences, but I also understand mercy. And I'm asking you to choose it. Mercy is weakness in this world. No, mercy is strength. It's choosing to be better than the people who hurt you." She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his arm. "You told me you weren't a good man. Prove yourself wrong." For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. The only sound was the traitor's ragged breathing and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then Adrian lowered the gun. "Get him out of here," he told Dimitri. "Turn him over to Sergei. Let him deal with his own traitor." Dimitri hauled the man to his feet and dragged him toward the door. The traitor was still crying, stammering thanks that no one acknowledged. When they were gone, Adrian turned to Lena. His expression was unreadable. "You shouldn't have interfered." "I know. That man deserved to die." "Maybe, but you didn't deserve to carry another death." She met his eyes. "Not for me. Not for anyone." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured against her hair. "Or maybe your salvation," Lena whispered back. She didn't know which was more likely, but as dawn broke over the city and they stood together in the wreckage of the night, she realized it didn't matter. They were in this together now, for better or worse, and somehow that felt like enough. Neither of them moved for a long time. Adrian's arms remained locked around Lena, his breath warm against her hair, and she could feel the tension slowly draining from his body. When he finally stepped back, his hands lingered on her shoulders, as if he needed the contact to steady himself. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "I should probably do a lot of things." Lena's voice was rough with exhaustion. "But hating you isn't one of them. You saw what I almost did. I saw what you chose not to do." She covered one of his hands with hers. "That's what matters." Adrian's expression flickered between disbelief and something that looked dangerously close to hope. But before he could respond, Dimitri returned, his face grim. "Sergei's received the package," he said. "He wants to meet again. Says we need to discuss terms." "Terms?" Adrian's voice went flat. "We already have an agreement. He claims Mrs. Carter's retrieval last night changed the parameters. He's calling it a breach of protocol." Dimitri's jaw tightened. "It's bullshit, but he's using it as leverage." "When does he want to meet?" "Tomorrow night. Neutral ground. His choice of location." Adrian was silent for a moment, his hand still resting under Lena's. Then he nodded. Tell him I'll be there. But this is the last negotiation. After tomorrow, the agreement stands or we end this another way. Dmitri understood the implication. I'll make the arrangements. When they were alone again, Lena turned to Adrian. What does he want? More than I've already given him, but that's not your concern right now. He touched her cheek, the gesture achingly gentle. You need rest, real rest. And I need to prepare for tomorrow. Let me come with you. No. The word was final. Sergei's already proven he'll use you as a weapon. I won't give him another opportunity. Then what am I supposed to do? Just sit here and wait? Yes. Stay safe. Visit your mother once she's settled in the new facility. Try to reclaim some piece of normal life. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone. And trust that I know what I'm doing. Lena wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. She nodded, and Adrian walked her back upstairs, his hand never leaving the small of her back. At her door, he paused. About earlier, he said. The kiss? Don't. Lena pressed a finger to his lips. Don't apologize for it. Don't call it a mistake. Just let it be what it was. And what was it? Honest. She dropped her hand. Maybe the most honest thing either of us has done in a long time. Adrian's expression softened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her again. Instead, he stepped back, creating careful distance. Get some sleep, Lena. I'll see you in the morning. She watched him disappear down the hallway, then closed her door and leaned against it, her heart still racing. The past few hours had been a whirlwind of terror and tenderness, and she had no idea how to process any of it. But when she finally crawled into bed, she fell asleep almost immediately, her dreams mercifully quiet. Morning came too quickly. Lena woke to find a note slipped under her door in Adrian's precise handwriting. Victor will take you to see your mother at 10. Take your time. I'll be working. She showered and dressed, choosing jeans and a soft gray sweater that Irina had left in the closet, then made her way downstairs. The house was quieter than usual, and she found Irina alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with methodical precision. Good morning, the older woman said without looking up. Coffee's ready. Breakfast will be done in a few minutes. Thank you. Lena poured herself a cup and sat at the small table in the corner. Where is everyone? Adrian's in meetings. Dmitri and the others are handling security arrangements. Irina shaped the dough into a loaf and set it aside to rise. It's going to be a difficult few days. Because of Sergei. Because of everything. Irina washed her hands and dried them on her apron. Adrian doesn't usually let people in, doesn't usually care what happens to strangers. But you're different. I don't know why. I do. Irina's smile was sad. You remind him that there's still goodness in the world, that not everything has to be transactional, and that terrifies him more than any threat Sergei could make. Before Lena could respond, Victor appeared in the doorway. Ready when you are, Miss Carter. The drive to the private facility took 40 minutes, winding through Boston's suburbs to a converted estate that looked more like a luxury resort than a medical center. Security was discreet but omnipresent. Guards at the gate, cameras on every corner, staff who moved with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were protecting. Margaret was in a suite on the 3rd floor, sitting up in bed with color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that Lena hadn't seen in months. The change was so dramatic, it made Lena's throat tight. Baby. Margaret held out her arms, and Lena crossed the room to embrace her. Look at this place. It's like something from a movie. How are you feeling? Better than I have in a year. The new treatment, Lena, they say it's working. The tumors are already shrinking. Margaret's voice broke. I might actually beat this thing. Lena felt tears spill over and didn't bother to wipe them away. That's incredible, Mom. It's a miracle. And it's all because of your Mr. Volkov. Margaret pulled back, studying Lena's face. Who is he really? And don't tell me he's just a friend. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, searching for words that wouldn't terrify her mother. He's someone who had the power to help, and he chose to use it. That's all that matters. Is it? Margaret's gaze was knowing. Because the way he looked at you last night, that wasn't the look of a man doing a favor. That was something else entirely. Mom, I'm not judging. I'm worried. Margaret took Lena's hand. Men like that, powerful men who operate outside normal rules, they're dangerous. Even when they mean well. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're falling for him, and I don't know if that's wonderful or terrifying. Both, Lena admitted. It's definitely both. Margaret was quiet for a moment, her thumb rubbing circles on Lena's hand. Your father was like that, charismatic, intense. Made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Her voice turned bitter. Right up until he decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. Adrian's not like that. Maybe not. But promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself trying to save someone who might not want to be saved. Lena thought about Adrian holding her in the foyer, thought about the way he'd lowered the gun because she'd asked him to. I promise. They spent the next 2 hours talking about everything and nothing. Margaret's treatment plan, Lena's plans to return to school, memories of better times. It felt almost normal, and Lena clung to that feeling like a lifeline. When visiting hours ended, she kissed her mother goodbye and rode back to the house in silence, Victor's presence a solid comfort in the front seat. Adrian was waiting in the study when she arrived. He looked exhausted, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Papers covered his desk, and his laptop displayed what looked like surveillance footage. "How's your mother?" he asked without looking up. "Better. The treatment's working." Lena closed the door behind her. "She asked about you." "What did you tell her?" "That you're someone who helps people." She crossed to the desk. "What are you working on?" "Sergei's organization, mapping his operations, identifying weaknesses." Adrian finally looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes went deeper than physical tiredness. "I need to end this, Lena, one way or another." What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow night's meeting will determine whether we have peace or war." He stood and moved to the window, staring out at the garden. "And I need to be prepared for either outcome." Lena joined him at the window. "What will you do if he demands more than you're willing to give?" "Walk away and accept the consequences." "Which are?" "Blood." The word was simple, final. His or mine? Probably both. The casual way he discussed violence should have repulsed her. Instead, Lena felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her chest. "Then don't go alone." "I won't. Dmitri and the others will be there." "I meant me." Adrian turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Absolutely not. You said yourself that Sergei uses me as leverage, so use that. Bring me to the meeting. Show him that I'm not afraid, that hiding me doesn't make you weaker." Lena's voice was steady, despite the fear curling in her stomach. "Let me stand beside you." "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been carrying this alone, making impossible choices to keep me safe. But I'm not a fragile thing that needs to be locked away. I'm stronger than you think." "I know how strong you are." Adrian's hands came up to frame her face. "That's not the issue. The issue is that if something happened to you, if Sergei hurt you because I brought you into his world, I would raze this entire city to the ground, and I can't afford that kind of weakness." "It's not weakness. It's caring about someone." Lena covered his hands with hers. "And maybe it's time you stopped seeing that as a liability." Adrian was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he pulled her close and kissed her with an intensity that stole her breath. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "You're going to destroy everything I've built to protect myself," he murmured. "Maybe you need to be destroyed. Maybe we both do." Lena's fingers curled into his shirt. "Maybe that's the only way either of us gets free." He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. And Lena let herself fall into it, let herself forget about loan sharks and mob bosses and the violence that circled them like sharks in dark water. For just this moment, there was only warmth and connection, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real out of all this chaos. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian's expression had shifted. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was something that looked like determination. "If you come tomorrow," he said quietly, "you follow my lead. No arguments, no improvising. Sergei is dangerous, and the men he'll have with him are worse. One wrong move and everything falls apart." "I understand." Do you? Because this isn't a game, Lena. This is life and death. And if I tell you to run, you run. No hesitation. I won't leave you. You will. His voice was steel. Because if it comes down to your life or mine, I choose yours every single time. And I need you to accept that. Lena wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't negotiable. This was the price of standing beside him. Okay, she whispered. Adrian nodded, then stepped back, creating distance again. Dmitri will go over security protocols with you in the morning. And tonight, he paused. Tonight, we prepare. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Dmitri walked Lena through what to expect at the meeting. The location, a warehouse Sergei owned in a neutral part of the city, the players, Sergei and his top lieutenants. The protocol, which mostly involves staying silent unless directly addressed. He'll try to provoke you, Dmitri warned. Say things designed to make you react. Don't give him the satisfaction. What kind of things? The kind that question your worth, Adrian's judgment, your mother's safety. Sergei likes to find pressure points and push until something breaks. Dmitri's expression was grim. But you're tougher than you look. I've seen how you handle fear. Just channel that tomorrow. Lena tried to absorb everything, tried to prepare herself mentally for whatever was coming. But as evening fell and the meeting loomed closer, anxiety began to claw at her composure. She found Adrian in the library after dinner, staring at the same surveillance footage he'd been reviewing earlier. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. Lena sat beside him on the leather sofa. What if tomorrow goes wrong? Then we adapt. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Adrian closed the laptop and turned to face her. I've played this scenario 100 different ways in my mind. Best case, Sergei accepts that the agreement stands and we walk away with peace. Worst case, don't. Lena pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't tell me the worst case. Not tonight. Adrian caught her hand and brought it to his chest, holding it over his heart. What do you want from me, Lena? What do you need? Just this. Just you being honest about what you're feeling instead of hiding behind strategy and control. I'm terrified, he said simply. Of losing you. Of failing to protect you the way I failed to protect Katya. Of discovering that I'm not strong enough to keep the people I care about safe. The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Lena shifted closer, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. You didn't fail, Katya. You were young and far away and doing the best you could, and you're not going to lose me. We're going to walk into that meeting together, and we're going to walk out together. I believe that. I wish I had your certainty. Then borrow mine. Lena leaned in and kissed him softly. Just for tonight, let yourself believe that everything will be okay. Adrian's arms came around her, pulling her close, and they stayed like that for a long time. Her head on his chest, his chin resting on her hair, both of them drawing strength from the contact. Eventually, he walked her upstairs to her room. At the door, he hesitated. Stay with me, Lena said quietly. I just don't want to be alone tonight. Adrian nodded and followed her inside. They lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, and Lena curled into his side while his arm wrapped around her shoulders. It was innocent and intimate all at once, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Lena felt truly safe. She fell asleep to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and her dreams were quiet. When morning came, Adrian was gone, but there was a note on the pillow beside her. You're braver than you know. Trust that. Alina dressed carefully in dark jeans and a black sweater, then braided her hair back from her face. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This harder, sharper version of herself who'd learned to survive in a world that wanted to break her. Dmitri was waiting downstairs with Victor and two other men Lena recognized from the security detail. Adrian appeared a moment later, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look even more formidable than usual. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. They drove in convoy, 2 cars moving through the city as the sun set and shadows lengthened. The warehouse was in an industrial area, all concrete and rust and broken windows. Sergei's people were already there, 5 black SUVs parked in a semicircle around the entrance. Adrian's hand found Lena's as they stepped out of the car. Remember what we discussed. Stay close. Stay quiet. And if things go wrong, I run. I know. She squeezed his hand. But they won't. We're going to be fine. Dmitri and the others formed a protective circle around them as they walked toward the warehouse entrance. The door was open, light spilling out into the darkness, and Lena could see figures moving inside. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened fractionally, and then they stepped through the door into enemy territory. The warehouse had been cleared except for a long table in the center, surrounded by chairs. Sergei Kozlov sat at the far end, flanked by 4 men who looked like they ate violence for breakfast. He was older than Lena expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. Adrian. Sergei's voice was smooth, cultured, completely at odds with his reputation. And you brought your little bird. How charming. Sergei. Adrian's tone was flat. Let's make this quick. You wanted to renegotiate. I'm here to listen. So businesslike. I always admired that about you. Sergei's gaze slid to Lena, and she felt it like oil on her skin. Miss Carter, you're even prettier than the report suggested. I can see why Adrian's so invested. Lena said nothing, just met his eyes steadily. Dmitri had warned her this would happen. The traitor was useful, Sergei continued, turning back to Adrian, but not worth what I gave up to get him. So I'm proposing an amendment to our agreement. We had a deal, which you violated when you extracted Mrs. Carter from the hospital. That was my leverage, Adrian. You can't simply take back what I claimed. I can when you claim something that was never on the table. Adrian's voice dropped to something deadly. We agreed. No one touches Lena or her mother. You broke that agreement. I borrowed her mother, temporarily. No harm done. This is semantics, Sergei. Get to the point. Sergei smiled, and it was the most unsettling thing Lena had ever seen. The point is that I want more, an ongoing partnership. Your intelligence resources at my disposal for the next 6 months. In exchange, Miss Carter and her mother remain untouched, permanently. No. Adrian's response was immediate. No? Sergei's eyebrows rose. You don't even want to consider... I said no. I gave you the traitor. I've honored every part of our agreement, and now I'm done negotiating. You stay away from Lena and Margaret, or we settle this the old way. The temperature in the room dropped. Sergei's men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Dmitri and the others mirrored the movement. The old way, Sergei repeated softly. You're threatening war over a girl you've known for a few weeks? I'm drawing a line, and if you cross it, there won't be anywhere in this city you can hide. Sergei studied Adrian for a long moment, then his gaze shifted to Lena again. Tell me, Miss Carter, are you worth all this? Worth the blood that will spill if Adrian and I go to war? Lena felt everyone's eyes on her. Adrian's hand tightened in warning, but she ignored it and spoke anyway. I think the question isn't whether I'm worth it. The question is whether you're willing to find out what happens when you push him too far. Her voice was steady, clear. Because from where I'm standing, you're testing a man who has nothing left to lose. And that makes him far more dangerous than you. Silence fell. Then Sergei laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. She has teeth, I like that. He leaned back in his chair. Very well, Adrian, we'll keep the original agreement. No amendments, no extensions. But understand this. The next time you interfere with my operations, there won't be negotiations. There will only be consequences. Understood. Adrian's posture didn't relax. And the same applies to you. Touch either of them again, and consequences won't begin to cover what happens next. We have an accord then. Sergei stood, his men rising with him. It's been a pleasure, Miss Carter. I hope we don't meet again. Likewise, Lena said. They walked out of the warehouse without looking back, and Lena didn't let herself breathe until they were in the car and moving. Then all the adrenaline drained away at once, leaving her shaking. Adrian pulled her against his side. You weren't supposed to speak. I know, but he needed to hear it. You could have gotten yourself killed. But I didn't, and now he knows I'm not just some helpless victim. Lena looked up at him. I told you I was stronger than you thought. Adrian's expression was caught between exasperation and admiration. You're going to give me a heart attack. Probably, but you'll survive. Dmitri glanced at them in the rearview mirror, and Lena could have sworn she saw him smile. They drove back to the house in silence, and when they arrived, Adrian led her straight to the study and poured them both drinks. It's over, he said, handing her a glass. Sergei won't touch you again. He'd lose too much face if he broke his word now. So we're safe. As safe as we can be in this world. Adrian took a long drink. Your mother's treatment will continue. Your debt is cleared, and you're free to go back to your life. The words hit her like cold water. Go back? To school. To normal. To everything that doesn't involve men with guns and warehouse negotiations. Adrian set his glass down. You never asked for this, Lena, and now that the threat's gone, you don't have to stay. Lena stared at him, understanding dawning. You're pushing me away. I'm giving you a choice. Bullshit. She set her own glass down with enough force to make it rattle. You're scared. Scared that if I stay, something will happen to me. Scared that caring about someone makes you weak. So you're doing what you always do, pushing away anything that threatens your control. That's not... It's exactly what you're doing. Lena crossed to him, her eyes blazing. But here's the thing, Adrian. I already made my choice. I made it when I sent you that text asking for help. I made it when I kissed you. And I'm making it again right now. Lena, I'm staying. Not because I need your protection anymore, but because I want to be here, with you. Building something that isn't based on fear or debt or obligation. She took his face in her hands. So stop trying to save me from yourself and just let me in. Adrian's control finally cracked. He pulled her against him and kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning, and Lena kissed him back with everything she had. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be with someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. Lena's fingers traced the line of his jaw. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Starting with you choosing to believe that you deserve this, that we deserve this. I want to believe that. Then try. For me. For us. She kissed him softly. Just try. And in the quiet of his study, surrounded by all the evidence of the dangerous world he'd built, Adrian Volkov made the most terrifying choice of his life. He chose to let himself love her. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and tender all at once, and Lena felt the last walls between them crumble. Adrian's hands were gentle as they framed her face, but there was a tremor in them that spoke of how hard this choice was for him, how much courage it took to let someone pass the armor he'd spent years building. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unevenly, Adrian pulled her close and just held her. Lena could feel his heartbeat against her cheek, fast and strong, and she wrapped her arms around him like she could anchor him to this moment, to this decision. I'm terrified, he whispered into her hair. I know. So am I. Lena pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, but being terrified together is better than being safe and alone. Adrian's laugh was rough, surprised. When did you become so wise? Probably around the time I got zip-tied in my own bathroom and had to text a stranger for help. She smiled, but it faded quickly. We've both been through hell, Adrian. Maybe it's time we stopped letting it define us. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. Stay tonight, not in the guest room, with me. It wasn't just an invitation. It was trust, vulnerability, the kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with physical desire and everything to do with choosing not to be alone anymore. Okay, Lena said softly. They stayed in the study for another hour, talking about nothing and everything. Her plans to return to school, his idea of transitioning some of his operations into legitimate businesses, the garden, and whether she wanted to help replant it in the spring. It felt impossibly normal, and Lena clung to that normalcy like a lifeline. Eventually, Adrian led her upstairs, past the guest room she'd been staying in, to the master suite at the end of the hall. It was larger than she expected, but surprisingly understated. Clean lines, dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the garden. Personal in a way the rest of the house wasn't. I can sleep on the couch if you're not comfortable, Adrian started. Don't be ridiculous. Lena sat on the edge of the massive bed. We're past that, don't you think? He smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders, and disappeared into the bathroom. Lena heard water running and took the opportunity to change into the pajamas she'd grabbed from her room. When Adrian emerged wearing dark sleep pants and nothing else, She tried very hard not to stare at the network of scars across his chest and shoulders. He caught her looking. Occupational hazards, some older than others. They don't bother me. Lena crossed to him and traced one particularly vicious scar that curved along his ribs. They're just proof you survived. Adrian caught her hand and brought it to his lips. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm really not. I'm just a waitress who got in over her head and somehow landed in the middle of a mob negotiation. You're so much more than that. He led her to the bed and they lay down facing each other, close but not touching. You're brave and stubborn, and you see good in people even when they've forgotten it exists in themselves. Is that what I do for you? Every day? Adrian reached out and traced the line of her jaw. You make me want to be better, to choose mercy over vengeance, to believe that maybe I'm not beyond redemption. Lena shifted closer, closing the distance between them. You were never beyond redemption, Adrian. You just needed someone to remind you. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the nightmares stayed away. Morning came with golden light streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Lena woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. How long have you been staring at me? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Not long. You talk in your sleep, did you know that? I do not. You do. Something about nursing exams and a coffee machine that wouldn't stop beeping. His smile was soft. It was adorable. Lena groaned and buried her face in the pillow. Please tell me I didn't say anything embarrassing. Define embarrassing. Adrian, you may have mentioned my name once or twice. He was definitely laughing now. In a very complimentary context. She swatted his chest and he caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. The playfulness faded, replaced by something more serious. I have a meeting this morning, he said quietly, with my lawyers and financial advisors. I'm starting the process of legitimizing my operations. It's going to take months, maybe years, but I want to build something clean, something that doesn't require looking over my shoulder constantly. Lena's breath caught. Because of me? Because of us. Because I want a future that isn't just about survival. He brought her hand to his lips. I can't undo the past, but I can choose what comes next. And I choose this. You. A life that isn't built on blood and fear. That's going to make enemies. Probably. But I have something now that I didn't have before. What's that? A reason to live, not just survive. Adrian kissed her softly. You changed everything, Lena, and I'm not letting that go. They went downstairs together to find Irina already preparing breakfast, a knowing smile on her face when she saw them arrive hand in hand. About time, she muttered in Russian, but loud enough for Adrian to hear. Irina, he warned, I'm just saying I'm not getting any younger. If I'm going to see you happy before I retire, you needed to stop being stubborn. She set plates in front of them with a satisfied expression. Miss Carter is good for you. Try not to ruin it. Adrian looked mortified, but Lena laughed. I'll do my best to keep him in line. Good luck with that, Dmitri said, appearing in the doorway with a tablet in hand. Boss, we need to go over the security reports before your meeting. Give us 10 minutes. Adrian's hand found Lena's under the table. Eat. I'll be back before lunch. The meeting stretched longer than expected. Lena spent the morning in the library, actually studying this time, her mind clearer than it had been in months. The nursing textbooks made sense now that the constant terror had lifted, and she found herself getting lost in the material. She was deep in a chapter on pharmacology when her phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Mom, everything okay? More than okay, baby. The doctors just gave me the results from this week's tests. The tumors have shrunk by 40%. 40%, Lena. Margaret's voice broke with joy. They're saying if this continues, I might be in full remission within 6 months. Lena felt tears streaming down her face. That's incredible. I can't believe it. Believe it. I'm going to beat this thing, and it's all because of the treatment Adrian made possible. Margaret paused. Is he there? I'd like to thank him properly. He's in a meeting, but I'll tell him you called. You do that. And Lena, I can hear it in your voice. You're happy, really happy, and I'm glad. Her mother's voice softened. I worried I was wrong about him, but maybe this is exactly what you both needed. Maybe it is, Lena agreed. They talked for another 20 minutes about treatment plans and visiting schedules, and Margaret's plan to start a garden in the facility's courtyard. When Lena finally hung up, she was still crying, but these were tears of relief and joy instead of fear. Adrian found her like that when he returned, sitting in the window seat with tears on her cheeks and a smile on her face. What happened? He was across the room in 3 strides, his hands on her shoulders. Are you hurt? Is it your mother? She's in remission, or she will be. The treatment's working better than anyone expected. Lena threw her arms around him. Adrian, she's going to be okay. She's actually going to be okay. The tension drained from his body, and he held her tight, his face buried in her hair. That's incredible. I'm so happy for you, for both of you. It's because of you. All of this, her recovery, my safety, this chance at an actual future, it's all because you chose to help a stranger in a coffee shop. Best decision I ever made. Adrian pulled back to look at her. The meeting went well. The lawyers think we can transition most of the operations within 18 months. It won't be easy, and there will be resistance from some of the old guard, but it's possible. What about Sergei? He'll adapt or he won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Adrian's expression was lighter than she'd ever seen it. I'm done playing his games, done living in that world. I want something different now. What do you want? He cupped her face in his hands. Mornings with you, a future that doesn't involve looking over my shoulder. Maybe, eventually, a family that doesn't have to grow up in fear. His thumb brushed away a lingering tear. I want normal, Lena. With you. Is that crazy? If it is, then we're both crazy. She kissed him softly, because I want that too. All of it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost dreamlike in its normalcy. Lena returned to school, diving into her nursing program with renewed focus. Adrian spent his days in meetings, systematically dismantling and rebuilding his empire into something legitimate. Evenings they spent together, sometimes at the house, sometimes visiting Margaret, sometimes just driving with no destination in mind. Dmitri remained head of security, but the team shrank as threats diminished. Irina continued managing the household and offering unsolicited but surprisingly wise relationship advice. And slowly, carefully, they built something real. 3 months after the warehouse meeting, Lena came home to find Adrian in the garden with a shovel, dirt streaked across his expensive shirt. What are you doing? She asked. Planting roses for spring. He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. I remember you said your grandmother used to plant bulbs with you. I thought maybe we could start that tradition here. Lena felt her throat tighten with emotion. You're planting a garden. I'm planting our garden. He held out a hand. Help me. They spent the afternoon working side by side, their hands dirty and their backs aching, planting roses and lavender and herbs. It was ordinary and perfect, and Lena had never been happier. That evening, as they cleaned up, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression shifted. It's Sergei, he said. Lena's stomach dropped. So did I, Adrian answered on speaker. Sergei. Adrian, I hope I'm not interrupting. Sergei's voice was smooth as ever. I wanted to inform you that I'm retiring, leaving Boston entirely. My organization will be dissolved or absorbed by others, but it no longer concerns you. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Why are you telling me this? Professional courtesy, and because that girl of yours, Miss Carter, she was right. I pushed too far, tested someone who had nothing left to lose, and I realized I didn't want to find out what happened when he snapped. A pause. You've won, Adrian. Enjoy your peace, you've earned it. The line went dead. Adrian stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down carefully. It's over. It's actually over. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled Lena into his arms. We're free. The relief was overwhelming. Lena felt years of tension drain away, leaving her lightheaded and almost giddy. What do we do now? Whatever we want. Adrian kissed her forehead. Absolutely whatever we want. 6 months later, Margaret was officially declared in full remission. The celebration was small, just Lena, Adrian, Irina, and Dmitri. But it was perfect. Margaret cried happy tears and hugged Adrian so hard he looked uncomfortable, but Lena saw the moisture in his eyes when her mother whispered thank you. "She's going to move in here," Adrian told Lena that night. "If that's okay with you. We have more than enough space and she shouldn't be alone while she's recovering."
"You'd do that? Lena, she's your mother, which makes her my family too." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Of course I'd do that. Margaret moved into a suite on the second floor 2 weeks later, and the house that had once felt too large and empty suddenly felt like a home. She and Irina became fast friends, often conspiring in the kitchen over recipes, and what Lena suspected were matchmaking schemes. 1 year after the night Lena sent that desperate text, she graduated from nursing school at the top of her class. Adrian was in the front row, looking absurdly proud, with Margaret beside him beaming. Dmitri and Irina had come too, and seeing them all there, her strange, unlikely family, made everything she'd been through feel worth it. At the graduation party that night, held in the garden they'd planted together, Adrian pulled her aside. "I have something for you," he said. "Adrian, you've already given me everything, not everything." He handed her a small velvet box. "Open it." Inside was a key, simple, silver, clearly to a door. "What's this?" "The cafe. Moretti's." Adrian's smile was soft. "Marco wanted to retire, and I thought, you always talked about wanting to help people, and what better way than owning a place where community happens? Where people who are struggling can find a warm cup of coffee and maybe someone who cares?" Lena stared at the key, overwhelmed. "You bought me the cafe?" "I bought us the cafe. If you want it, we can run it together. Or you can run it, and I'll just drink terrible espresso and watch you work. Whatever you want." It wasn't terrible espresso. It was objectively terrible. I only kept coming back because of you. He pulled her close. "So what do you say? Want to own a coffee shop with a reform mob boss?" Lena laughed through her tears and kissed him. "Yes, to all of it. Yes." The cafe reopened 3 months later with a new name, Katya's Place, a tribute to the sister Adrian had lost, and the second chances they'd both been given. It became exactly what Lena had imagined, a community hub where struggling students could study for free, where the elderly could gather for conversation, where anyone who needed help could find it without judgment. And every morning at 7:15, Adrian Volkov sat in the corner booth drinking espresso and watching his future wife move through the space with grace and purpose, knowing that the best decision he'd ever made was helping a stranger who'd sent him a single desperate word. On a crisp October morning 2 years after that first night, Lena stood in the garden she and Adrian had built together, surrounded by roses in full bloom and people she loved. Margaret stood beside her, healthy and radiant. Irina dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Dmitri tried to look stoic and failed. And Adrian stood at the makeshift altar, looking at Lena like she hung the moon. The ceremony was simple, intimate. No mob bosses, no threats, no violence. Just two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. When the officiant asked if they had vows, Adrian went first. "I spent most of my life believing I was beyond saving, that the choices I'd made defined me, and there was no path back to anything good. And then you sent me a text asking for help, and everything changed." His voice was steady but thick with emotion. "You saw past the armor to the person underneath. You chose mercy when I would have chosen vengeance. You reminded me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. Lena, you saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I promised to spend the rest of my life proving I was worth saving." Lena was crying before he finished. She took a shaky breath and began her own vows. "I used to think strength meant surviving on your own, never asking for help, never showing weakness. And then the night came when I had no choice but to reach out, and you answered. You could have ignored me, could have turned away, but you chose kindness. You chose protection. You chose me." She squeezed his hands. "Adrian, you gave me back my mother, my dreams, my future. But more than that, you taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's courage. And loving someone isn't giving up control, it's choosing partnership. I promise to stand beside you, to choose mercy and hope, and to build a life with you that honors everyone we've lost by celebrating everything we've found." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden.
When the officiant pronounced them married and Adrian kissed her, Lena felt something slot into place in her chest, the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. This was home, not the house or the garden or even the cafe. This man, this unlikely family, this hard-won piece. This was everything. The reception lasted well into the evening, full of laughter and dancing and toasts that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. But Lena's favorite moment came late in the night, when most of the guests had left and she and Adrian stood alone in the garden under a sky full of stars. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. Deliriously. She leaned into him. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." Adrian turned her to face him. "I have something to tell you. Another surprise." "Adrian Volkov, if you bought me something else—" "Not bought, built." He pulled out his phone and showed her architectural plans. "A foundation, in Katya's name. To help people like you, like both of us, who are drowning in debt trying to save someone they love. Medical bills, emergency expenses, all of it. So no one else has to make the choices we made." Lena's breath caught. "Adrian, that's incredible. I've been working on it for months. Dimitri's going to help run it. We're calling it the Second Chance Foundation." He cupped her face. "I can't undo the past. Can't bring back the people I've lost or erase the things I've done, but I can make sure some good comes from all that pain. We can make sure." "Together," Lena agreed. "Always together." They stood in the garden they'd planted, surrounded by the life they'd built from ashes and desperation and one terrifying moment of reaching out for help. And Lena thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, scared, alone, drowning, and the woman she'd become. Stronger, yes, but more than that, whole. Not because Adrian had saved her, though he had. Not because she'd saved him, though she'd done that too. But because they'd chosen each other every single day since that first desperate text. Because they'd fought for the chance to be more than their worst moments. Because they'd learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing a better future. Adrian pulled her close and kissed her under the stars, and Lena kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and fierce hope in her heart. They'd both been broken once, but together they'd learned to be whole, and that was worth every moment of darkness they'd endured to find each other. Years later, when people asked how they met, Lena would smile and say simply, "I sent him a message asking for help, and he answered." She never mentioned the loan sharks or the violence or the mob negotiations. Those were just chapters in a story that had so many better ones. Like the morning Adrian surprised her with breakfast in bed on their 5th anniversary, their daughter sleeping peacefully in the nursery down the hall. Like the day the foundation helped its 1,000th family and Adrian cried reading the thank you letters. Like every ordinary evening when they sat together in the garden, their hands intertwined watching the roses bloom. The girl who'd sent one desperate word had found everything she never knew she needed, and the man who'd answered had found redemption in the most unlikely place. Together, they'd built a life worth fighting for, and they lived it fully, gratefully, joyfully, every single day.